Welcome. This is a homily for the 24th Sunday of the year. And I need to start by saying that although this is summer for us, so we are used to backing off on certain issues and work and so forth, we have to realize the church just keeps on wanting to train us, because we're hopefully praying better this year than we did last year. Hopefully we are relating better this year than we did last year. And hopefully we are loving better than we did last year. And this is why these readings are so intense in terms of this is how you're supposed to be relating to God and to each other. So with that in mind, then, the first reading is from the book of Exodus. And what you have is Moses, you know the story as well as I do, Moses going up the mountain and the people fashioning a golden calf and so forth. And God and Moses have this dialogue where Moses intercedes for the Jewish people, and he prefigures Christ in the sense that Christ is going to be the one who is the advocate for us, and he called himself that. All right, now, Moses implores God, because God had already done all these things for the Jewish people, why waste it, basically? And so the Lord relented in the punishment he had threatened to inflict on his people. Now, in fact, there was a punishment. The verse that's not in this reading is actually where Moses calls those who are for the Lord, tells them to get out their swords and to kill the people around them. And you can read all about that in Exodus. But the point here is that at some point there is a reckoning. And the reckoning is what we call already in this temporal realm, temporal punishment. And we can ask to be released from that and so forth. But we need to realize that when we do stupid things, we do damage literally the whole universe. That's not an exaggeration to say that. The second reading, the psalm, is I will rise and go to my Father. You'll recognize that as being a line out of the gospel, but it's important here is because the psalmist in this case, recognizes that he is a sinner and needs to go to his Father. And of course, that's the line that's going to appear in the gospel. Have mercy on me, O God, wash me from my guilt. A clean heart create for me. Notice it's only God who can do this, okay? If we are asking for that, it is already by the grace of God, so we're motivated by God's grace. And at the same time, it's God's grace that frees us up a bit to be able to start letting go of our sins, developing a clean heart. The plea is always, cast me not out of your presence. That's the goal. We know, the psalmist knows, that ultimately it's the presence of God that we absolutely long for. We may try drugs, sex, television, whatever, to try and replace that, but in fact, none of those things are anywhere near a substitute for being in the presence of God. Moving then to the second reading, you have Paul writing to Timothy and explaining, I was once a blasphemer and a persecutor and arrogant. And it's basically, that was the problem. Paul has got enough insight to be able to look back in his life and genuinely make a judgment about how he had behaved. But I was treated mercifully because I acted out of ignorance in my unbelief. Now, for him, it was genuinely ignorance. He was a Pharisee, he knew Jewish religion backwards and forwards, and consequently he was able to say, look, I know what religion is. These people, Christians, are not doing the same thing, therefore they must be wrong. And consequently, he was justified, in his mind at least, in persecuting them, etc., etc. Now, he comes to this realization that he was ignorant. And that is another lesson for today. Not only can we expect to be literally caught up by our own sins, as we see in Exodus, but we can also realize that we have to look into our hearts and say, are we genuinely ignorant? Because let's face it, a lot of people have had bad catechetics. A lot of people have found really poor representations of Christianity on the internet. And consequently, we have to take a look into our hearts and say, look, what do I know? And sideline here, what we know has to fit the catechism exactly, because that's the best, neatest, most precise, most accurate summary of Christianity. And the thing here is, he realized he was genuinely ignorant. Once God had spoken to him in Jesus Christ, he knew that he had been wrong, and therefore he could change, go through a conversion experience. And conversion is the big lesson as well today, because if we are praying the same way as we prayed 20 years ago, if we are loving the same way as we loved 20 years ago, if we are relating to people in the same way as we did 20 years ago, we are probably not doing the best we can. And if we are informed by Christ, look, you can do better. I'm giving you the power to do better. Then we can follow along with Paul and have a conversion experience. Lastly, then we have this gospel, and as you remember, it's got two little parables in it, the lost sheep and the lost coin, and then comes the great parable, the parable of the prodigal son. And the parable of the prodigal son is just one of those dynamite teachings. And what it is literally walking through the life of this young man, maybe 20, 21, and he has wasted his inheritance. He realizes just how stupid he has been, because in fact, he is looking after pigs. This is not something that a Jew would do. He is starving because he's not even doesn't even have the initiative to pick up some of the pods that the pigs are being fed with. And he realizes, look, I'm living far worse than my dad's servants. So I'm going back and I'm going to genuinely apologize. And he says, I have sinned against heaven and against you, his father, who he sees right there in front of him. Because he's had this conversion experience, he's going home and his father already sees him at the distance. And his father goes out and embraces him and tells his servants, and you know the rest of the story. But the point is, the Father is looking, and the Father is an image of the Divine Father. The Father is looking, he's looking for us, despite how stupid we can be and how evil we can be. We can, therefore, really look into our hearts, have a conversion experience, because God's grace is working all the time, and therefore return to the Father and be welcomed into his household. And that is the dream of all human beings, that we live in the household of God. Thank you.